Not hearing anything. Not hearing anything.
Just a minute, David.
Okay, we'll go ahead and call the council special session to order. It's Wednesday, March 6th, time is 5:30 p.m. We'll go ahead and turn it over to John Walsh for introductions.
All right, thank you, Mayor. I'll get started here. So we're here for a central waterfront kind of check-in on the scope of work, which started off as phase one. It has three subparts: phase 1A, 1B, and a forthcoming 1C. And that effort, the 1C effort, is to continue the work, the grant funded work that we already have available. And we have David Weatherby from Maltmaster Longi. Rachel's been kind of running point on this project for several years now, and we have a PowerPoint presentation. So it's
David, do you want to start your presentation?
No, we're gonna start.
Oh.
Yeah, I think agenda. I'm second on the agenda.
yeah,
Or
Rachel and I are going to go back and forth through some of this.
Okay.
About the history of the project and how long we've been working on it and how the waiting to record. Or
Oh, we're recording. Yeah. We're recording that.
Presentation mode at the very top.
Oh, sorry. My mouse isn't working very well. Okay.
So this photo here of the Central Waterfront project, actually it's the entire waterfront redevelopment project, is because it's such a big effort. We've very deliberately broken it up into the sum of its parts, where we have the green up there as the top is the riverfront district projects we're working on right now. The red is the central waterfront, and then the yellow is the the industrial business park, and the orange is port property that's kind of adjacent to that. And this is something, it's part of a big vision. It's part of 2 miles of waterfront potential redevelopment. Basically the future of the economic future of the community in a lot of ways. Sandwiched in between the lagoon and the development to the north is this wastewater lagoon that, early on we had developers come and visit, and they were pretty excited about the project, but they had some concerns about, odors and things of that nature might mean. We got to thinking about, what it would look like if it was, if it wasn't there, it was somewhere else, if that property was repurposed with any number of sources of fill. And, we've been working with that to see if it can be done, see if it could be done safely. And, perhaps in a way that was revenue positive, so we could have lesser impacts on city utilities. Next slide there. Yeah, this goes back a way. I'll try to go pretty quickly. I think most everybody here has seen all of this. Started off in 2009. There was some work. Council at the time adopted a waterfront overlay for the Vanier property, recognizing future, even though it was industrial property, to do some reuse if the opportunity ever came available. And then come along about 2012 when Boise announced their closure at the mill. They also listed the Vanier property for sale. And the city kind of picked that up in 2013 and I started doing some work on it. We had the American Institute of Architects. Well, we won that national competition for them to come out and do an assessment of the city and offer some ideas of what reuse would look like. And, some of the ideas for the central waterfront came out of that session and presentation with them. And then over the years, we've been working on various federal, a lot of grants, the EPA grants, DEQ grants, brownfield planning grants. And we developed the financial tools with the Urban Renewal Agency. All the pieces of what connects the river to the highway system, so that transportation, two big projects with transportation growth management, the TGM projects, some of you will recall those. Basically connections from St. Helens to the highway, and then from Plymouth to the highway. Two different projects there. Next slide. Nice keep faces in the picture there. So
You got pants.
yeah, I got back up. That is the downstairs of the Waterside or the Muckle building before they did the tenant improvements.
Oh, okay.
It's putting
That too.
in the structural steel and
Looks like a bird box.
after that meeting was over, it was still fenced and gated off, and we opened up the gates and let people walk on the property for the first time. And some of the people had never been on the site before, and they're lived here their whole lives, never been on the site. It was kind of awe-inspiring in that regard. Yeah, I can switch.
And the entire time I was like, John Walsh, tear down this fence. They got torn out.
Or paint it on pink, you know.
Meeting already, huh?
So throughout all of the waterfront projects, I'll just say it collectively, there's been this desire, stated core values, and they really haven't changed much over the years, about ensuring that we have public access to the riverfront, preserving our cultural heritage, and then setting this up for a platform for sustainable economic development. It's just not going to be all park or all, it's going to be something that's sustainable for future uses. Next. So the existing lagoon the property is 50 acres, 39 of that's lagoon. It was built in 71. It was a shared facility between the city, its wastewater, and then the mill site operating pretty good pace at that point. Where their pulp and paper, you see all the pulp piles down, or the chip piles down at the bottom of the photo there, where they're using pulp, and all the little white dots you see in the lagoon are aerators, and that thing was turned on, the whole city would light up, foam would be flying everywhere. It's quite messy at the time, but now it looks about like that. There's not much happening. It was sized for 40 million gallons a day. We still have water rights for 40 million gallons a day. The current use is, that's outdated at 3 million. And right now there's much less than that. So
Still used for city sewage. Just not.
it's still, you see on the right hand side, you see that's the primary. You see the wastewater, the blue roof.
Oh, gotcha.
That's where the primary comes in. That's for the first treatment, lots of aeration. And then it moves out to the end. It kind of works back to the baffles. So you can see it's a very long exposure time. It's big, it's massively oversized.
The berm is that bottom part that
And the berm
keeps
that's
it separated from the river.
is the rock berm. A levee, it's a berm, but it keeps the material from going in the river. So as part of the repurposing effort, we looked at, what could it be if it was filled in? And that's one potential rendering that had a boat launch and beaches and amphitheaters and soccer fields and ball fields. It's surrounded by multifamily housing. And there's one possible scenario. Yeah, can it be done safely? What are the benefits? Is there community support? And really, this whole project has two big buckets. One is, can it technically be done? And two, is it political? Is the community willing to accept it? Next slide. Another recap of the timeline here, 14 to 16. Some investigation. Waterfront planning, 16 to 17. Early evaluation, testing the concepts, the market study. Got those potentially revenue positive types of material that might be acceptable. 18 to 20. That's the first phase and its first part, which was the existing conditions report and the geology, hydrography, plains, floodplains, wetlands, existing conditions. And I'll break here and say that a lot of the pace with this project has been slow and highly dependent on other sources of funding. So non-city sources of funding. We've been trying to get grants, trying to get basically grants to move this thing forward. So there's sufficient resources that probably could have gone a lot faster, but we're taking our time, being mindful of our resources. But it's an important project, and I think, I hope you agree that we want to know the safety of our lagoon and the birds supporting it. So in 2020, we got the phase 1 characterization report released, and we're continuing that geotechnical groundwater sludge sampling 1B port that we're talking about in 2024. Slide. And David Weatherby's online, and
Hey, hello. Thank you, John. Well, my name is David Weatherby with Mall Foster Longy. I'm a geologist.
Give us just a minute here, David, so we can get you up on the screen.
Oh, okay. Oh, yeah. I see the screen in the background there. It's black. I like all the green and yellow, by the way.
Yeah. Okay, there you are.
Okay. Yeah, David Weatherby. I'm a principal geologist at Mall Foster Longy, native Oregonian, grew up in a small town unincorporated town west of Eugene, studied at the U of O, and been practicing geology in Oregon for 35 years. So I got involved in this project beginning about 2018 when we began to think about the phase 1 characterization that would need to occur. And because I'm all about understanding what's underground, I was asked to help lead that effort. I thought I would talk real quick about the phases, just so everybody understands when we talk about phase 1 and phase 2 and phase 1B and phase 1C. It's a lot of phases. These are DEQ terms, and the phases all relate to the solid waste permit that we would need to obtain to construct the facility as a landfill. So that permit application, there was a whole bunch of work that needs to happen to prepare the permit application. All of the baseline studies that we did and a lot of preliminary engineering to get some sense of how would we construct and build and operate this facility. Is it constructible? Can we do so in a way that doesn't impact the environment or the surrounding community? There's a lot of questions that need to be asked, a lot of work that needs to be done just to submit the permit application to DEQ. And all that work leading up to the milestone of permit application submittal is phase 1. DEQ reviews all that. If they determine that, gee, yes, it seems like this is a project that can move forward, we think it's probably permittable, it can be designed safely, all those things, then DEQ issues what's called a preliminary authorization, which then allows us and the engineers to proceed with phase 2, which is then everything you need to do to then fully study and design the facility and submit a final design to DEQ that DEQ can then review and issue the solid waste permit. So we're still in phase 1. We have not submitted the permit application yet. That's still at least a year out. There's a lot more work that we need to do, which is the phase 1C scope of work that I think you've all seen by now. I'll be talking about that in a little bit. My colleague, Kathy Lombardi, is our principal engineer who's been managing the the engineering side of things She got kicked to the ground with COVID this morning and asked me to talk about phase 1C. So I'll be talking about the engineering side of things, but full disclosure, I'm not an engineer, but I understand most of the elements and have, help develop portions of the scope of work. So I can talk about that a little bit, but if you got really detailed questions about the design, we might have to put a pin in it and get back to you on that. Sound good? Okay, well, I'm going to share my screen then. Thankfully, John kind of gave you a rundown. Let's see. Rachel, can you enable my screen sharing?
Can you do it now?
All right, there we go. Let's see here. There's my scope. So I got so many dang windows open. Yeah, that's not the one I want. I got to get over to the other one. Give me a second here. Share. I want that one right there. Okay. Are you seeing, hopefully you're seeing the text, phase 1 landfill characterization? Some bullets underneath it?
Yep.
Okay, great. Well, John already sort of covered the overall schedule, but I'll just go through kind of the details of what phase 1 looked like. So beginning back in 2019 is when we started the phase 1 characterization. And as I did, the primary objectives of the phase 1 is to begin to develop a preliminary understanding of the site conditions, to assess is this a suitable site for a landfill, and to obtain enough information to begin to advance the facility design leading up to that solid waste permit application. So it's a lot of desktop gathering data about the site and surrounding area, as well as on-site investigations. So elements included, the existing land use, zoning, adjacent landowners and what type of landowners, the physical setting on the landscape of the site. We looked at the National Register of Historic Places to see if there's historic structures nearby, characterizing the climatology or the climate and the meteorology, the weather, basically how much does it rain, surface water features. We got Multnomah and Chandler nearby and some areas that are probably wetlands. We looked at national wetland inventory maps to gather data about wetlands. And then a big component was the subsurface investigation that we conducted in 2019 to begin looking at the geology and soils around the site. And then GRI, a subcontractor to MFA, has been doing the geotechnical evaluation. So geotechnical engineering is yet another subdiscipline of engineering that we don't do at MFA. So we work with GRI to provide the geotechnical services. Go to the next page. So timeline, in 2019, we prepared the work plan for the phase 1 characterization, submitted that to DQ, got their stamp of approval, and then we did the phase 1 field work in that summer. We drilled 6 borings, 2 up on that basalt bluff west of the lagoon, and 4 more along the berm or the levee of the lagoon on the east side. And in those borings, we installed permanent groundwater monitoring wells so that we can collect groundwater samples and assess those. And then GRI began the geotechnical investigation. They did a couple borings in the riparian area just below the levee. They did what are called cone penetrometer tests, which is simply a device. It's basically a drill bit that pushes a metal rod in the ground. And based on the resistance of the soil to that rod and the sidewall frictions, they can get data that they can process and begin to understand the types of soils that are present underground. We buttoned all that up in the phase 1 report, submitted that to DQ right before COVID, got their comments back, responded to their comments. The DQ identified a number of data gaps, which was no surprise, because this is just the first phase of assessing the conditions at the site. We responded to each of their comments, and a bunch of the data gaps were things that we said, yeah, we plan to do that as part of this phase one. And then some of the data gaps were things that were like, yeah, that's down the road after we get to phase two and get your preliminary authorization. You know, we'll do some of those other things, but they weren't critical at this time to that effort. Then some time went by, as John said, that, you know, there's been some down periods while we got funding. So we got the FEMA funding in 2022, and that funded the next phase of phase one, which we called phase 1B. So the primary objective of that was to go back out and do more work to address the data gaps that DEQ identified, mainly having to do with just better understanding the subsurface conditions under the lagoon, and then doing more geotechnical work to understand the engineering properties of the soils. We did that. So wrote another work plan, submitted to DEQ, and then beginning in August of 2022 and through about March of 2023, we implemented the field work. So the work the MFA did, so recall in 2019, we installed 6 borings, 4 along the levee, 2 up on the bluff. One of the data gaps DEQ identified was, hey, we'd like to know more about this sludge that's in the lagoon, and we'd like to know more about the geology under the lagoon. So that meant we had to get out on the lagoon in a boat and collect a bunch of samples of the sludge, send it off to a laboratory for analysis. And then we put in January, February last year, we put a drill rig on a barge and floated it out in the lagoon. And we drilled 5 borings through the lagoon bottom and down as far as we could go with the drill rig, collected cores so we could look at what types of materials were under the lagoon. And then at one of the locations, we collected a groundwater sample from right under the lagoon. And then we also went back to those 6 monitoring wells that we installed in 2019 and collected groundwater samples again from those wells. This time around for phase 1B, all of the groundwater samples from the monitoring wells and lagoon sludge sample and the groundwater sample that we collected right under the lagoon, we analyzed those at the lab for a very, very long list of anthropogenic chemicals, contaminants, basically anything that you could ever imagine being present in the environment by human activities, we analyzed for. The reason for that is that if and when this becomes a landfill, one of the things DEQ requires around landfills is monitoring wells around the landfills and then you have to periodically sample that groundwater for the lifetime of landfill to confirm that the landfill's not contaminating groundwater. And we know that wastes that would be placed in the facility, potentially, you know, we're looking at material dredged from Portland Harbor could be placed here. So one of the things we want to know is what are the conditions now of the groundwater quality? Because we want to know that because if there are contaminants currently in the ground, we want to know that so that when the landfill's built and we begin monitoring groundwater later date and we get detections of chemicals, that we don't draw the conclusion that, oh, the landfill is contaminating groundwater. Well, it's not, because we went out there ahead of time and analyzed groundwater for a long list of chemicals. So I saw the packet that you were provided that includes our phase 1B report. And if you didn't fall asleep getting through that, there's some amazing data tables in the back that are very long with all the different chemicals we looked at in groundwater. So that was a major objective this time around, is to understand baseline groundwater quality conditions. And we did the same with the sludge sample. No surprise, the sludge has some contamination in it because it came from a pulp and paper mill. So, and then, like I said, GRI came back out and did another boring down in that riparian area. And then they did what are called resistivity and seismic refraction surveys. These are just basically sending shock waves into the ground and electrical currents into the ground that generates data that allows them to develop a cross section of what's under the ground, different soil types and or bedrock, kind of like a CAT scan for the ground surface, what's underground. And then all of that work we wrapped up in our phase 1B report that we submitted to DEQ, and DQ thankfully responded here just a few weeks ago that we pretty much addressed most of those data gaps that we set out to do, but they noted that we need to do more work at the site to better understand the geotechnical conditions underground. Is everyone tracking so far? Hopefully, thumbs up. Can't see your thumbs, but hopefully everything's good so far. So before I get on to the phase 1C scope, I want to talk a little bit about the geotechnical challenges. There are three. This first one here. So I'm going to share a cross section here. Let's see, I got to stop sharing and then share the cross section. All right, you seeing this?
Yep.
Zoom out a little bit. Zoom out. This is in our phase 1B report. So this is a cross section from west out east towards Multnomah Channel. The lagoon is right here. This is the bluff that goes up to the west. Everything you see in blue and green here is solid basalt hard bedrock. Everything in yellow is sediment, sands and silts. And one of the things we determined from all of this investigation, which is really pretty remarkable from a geologic perspective, is you see this deep trough here in the bedrock. It comes back up. We know on the other side of Multnomah Channel over there by what's it called, Warrior Rock, there on the north end of Sauvie Island is basalt bedrock. We've got this deep feature here that's just filled full of this soupy sediment. Geologic story here. This is actually the old channel of the Columbia River back during the last ice age, more than 12,000 years ago, when sea level was 300 feet lower during the ice age. The Columbia River responded by eroding down into its floodplain. And then 12,000 years ago at the end of the ice age, all the glaciers melted, sea level came back up, and the river then deposited sediment in its old channel back up to where it is today. So this is just the old ice age channel you're seeing here. But the tricky part from a geotechnical perspective right here, when you look at the lagoon, this western portion of the lagoon, that sort of, you know how the lagoon has that little bite taken out of it on the west side of the lagoon. I believe that was actually a hard rock quarry back in the day. So this current bluff that you see right here, back in the day, the bluff probably continued out and then dropped off about here, but all that rock was quarried back and then the lagoon was built. And so that western portion of the lagoon is sitting right on top of bedrock. There's a thin little smear of muck, but basically right under hard basalt bedrock. And then the basalt just takes a deep dive down to minus 280 feet below sea level. So the challenge is, if we fill up this lagoon up to, you know, build the levee taller, some kind of berm, put a landfill liner across here and fill up the landfill with material. What GRI determined is this sediment over here is very compressible. It's consolidated, but not a lot. It's rapidly deposited by the river in the last 12,000 years. And so what they determined with their preliminary modeling and the soil samples they collected and sent to a lab, and they squished and sheared and all the things they do to understand how the soils will behave when you load the soil with a bunch of mass, they determined that this soil over here could settle by upwards of 9 feet. Whereas over here, where the landfill is sitting right on top of bedrock, you'd get no settlement. So what that means, I'll stop sharing so I can talk with my hands. So you got one portion of the lagoon that's sitting on basalt, another sitting on sediment. Landfills have to be constructed with a liner, just like a swimming pool. You got to have a thing to keep your water in. So the liners are made of HDPE, high density polyethylene. It's just visqueen on steroids, very thick plastic liner. And typically you have a sandwich of these liners under the landfill to prevent any leachate in the landfill from getting into the ground. The problem is if you have one portion on bedrock and another portion that's going to settle 9 feet, and you have a plastic liner across that area where that interface between the rock and sediment where it settles is going to potentially stress and stretch that liner, and it could cause the liner to fail. So that's why that first geotechnical concern is going back to my notes here. Got to get back to it here. Okay, that's what this first paragraph is all about, is this differential settlement. So differential meaning one part of this landfill will settle a lot, the other not so much. If the entire lagoon was just sitting on basalt, or if the entire lagoon was just sitting on that soft sediment, such that the whole facility settled at the same rate, that's not a problem. But we got this weird situation with part basalt, part sediment. So that's the differential sediment, which we need to look into more during phase 1C, which I'll talk about in a little bit. The second, you probably heard a lot about liquefaction during earthquakes. Everyone's been to the beach and you shake your foot in the wet sand and it liquefies and your foot sinks into the ground. And that's really neat when you're a kid. It's not so neat when you're trying to build a landfill, because all that sediment I showed you that's very deep, and then the ground surface drops off into Multnomah Channel. The initial modeling that GRI did based on the physical properties of those soil samples that they analyzed, and they plugged that into their model that shakes the ground digitally. It shows that soil that the levee is currently built on, and an even bigger levee would need to be built on, that soil could liquefy and just flow laterally towards Multnomah Channel, and the levee could fail and everything in it. So that's a challenge in figuring out, okay, how do we engineer this site to mitigate that liquefaction potential? There are ways you can do it. Comes with a cost, and so that's something we need to look at as part of phase 1C. And finally, the last challenge is, if you remember my cross section, lagoon is only like right above the water level of Multnomah Channel. And Multnomah Channel is, the water levels there basically, more or less sea level. And we know we have very shallow groundwater right on the lagoon. And so the problem is you put a liner across the bottom of the lagoon, you got groundwater right under the liner, and Multnomah Channel's here. And during a flood event, when the level of Multnomah Channel comes up, the weight of all that extra water pushes down onto the groundwater under the ground, and basically makes the groundwater underneath the liner want to equilibrate and come up. So you basically have this hydrostatic pressure pushing up on the underside of the liner, were the liner to be installed at the bottom of the where the lagoon is currently. So it has this potential to float the liner. So that's the third kind of major geotechnical challenge that we need to figure out. Like, how do we mitigate that? Do we put in some sort of dewatering system under the entire facility, or do we have to backfill the lagoon up to an elevation high enough that the liner wouldn't float? And that's another option, but that means you'll have less capacity to put stuff into the landfill, which potentially affects the economics of the landfill. So those are the three big geotechnical challenges. And so basically doing phase 1C, GRI is going to go back out and do some more investigation, collect more samples, do more modeling of how the soils will behave. We've got a landfill expert, the expert in landfill liner design we're going to bring into the project to better understand how do we mitigate that differential settlement. One option is to maybe build the landfill in a couple different cells, one that's just on the basalt with its own liner that doesn't settle, and then the rest that's on sediment. Maybe we build that as a separate cell that can then just settle differentially. These are the ideas we're kicking around right now, but these are the things that we need to truth out during phase 1C. Excuse me. How's everybody so far?
Good.
Good. Okay. Let's see. Well, then just wrapping up for that phase 1C again, I talked about the three different geotechnical constraints that are the outcome of that. We have now, through all the borings we did, we've very well characterized the groundwater around the site. So we've checked a box on that. We know there is some contaminants that we detected in groundwater under the landfill and some of the monitoring wells in general. Many of the chemicals that we detected in the groundwater are the same chemicals we detected in the sludge. So just, 60 years now, or 50 some odd years of that lagoon being a lagoon, and knowing it handled wastewaters from the mill, and knowing that the liner on the lagoon probably was not ever, or has not been in a while, waterproof. And so some of that wastewater is probably getting in the ground. And that's why we're seeing some different detections of contaminants in the ground. But the important thing is we know that now, so that if this becomes a facility in the future and we have to monitor groundwater during the lifetime of the landfill, we'll already know what's present in groundwater, so that those contaminants aren't just immediately, oh, your landfill liner is leaking. For like, no, those chemicals are already present in groundwater. So, okay. I'm going to move on then to the phase. Are we doing good on time? Just wanted
A little bit of time,
Okay.
not a lot, but a little bit
Well,
behind schedule, but,
okay.
Okay.
I mean, if you've all taken a look at the phase 1C scope of work, I can go through it pretty quick. I'm just going to pull it up here, and hopefully you're all seeing the phase 1C scope. Of course, the introduction talks about everything we did, which I've now talked about. And so we're now moving on to phase 1C. So the phase 1C is yet more work we need to do to get us to that milestone of submitting the solid waste permit application. So there are a whole bunch of tasks, 7 tasks that we need to implement as part of phase 1, but it's all geared towards, there's a couple big questions we need to answer. One is we need to do more geotechnical evaluation and look at design alternatives to accommodate those geotechnical constraints, and how would we mitigate them? What would that mitigation look like? How much would it cost to do that? We're going to redo our market analysis, which we did back in 2016, and factor in these mitigation measures I talked about and what their costs are. And if we have to tweak the landfill design, like I said, make it the liner at a higher elevation, or split the landfill into multiple cells, how does that affect the marketability of the project? We want to do that to make sure that, number one, that we still think this is a project that we can design, mitigate geotechnical considerations, build, manage, and still have it be an economically viable project. And then, of course, we'll have to advance the design. There's some risk assessment related to air monitoring that we need to do. We need to figure out what to do with the existing wastewater treatment plant is in the lagoon. That's going to have a new wastewater treatment plant somewhere else. So that's a task to look at the feasibility and how and where would you move your wastewater treatment plant, and how long would that take? And then we'll prepare finally the phase 2 work plan. So, and then we'll prepare the solid waste permit application. So the application will say to DEQ, we want to build a landfill. Here's all the science we've done during phase 1, 1B and 1C to characterize the site conditions, geotechnical conditions. Here's all the preliminary engineering we've done. Here's how we think we want to build this facility. Here's how we think we're going to mitigate geotechnical concerns. Here's how the landfill liner would be built. All of those things. We submit the application, and then we hopefully get DEQ preliminary approval. So I'll just skim through real quick. The market analysis I've already talked about. We did this initially in 2016. It was updated in 2021. And then with our most recent work now and having a better idea of some of the geotechnical challenges, we're going to redo that as our GRI, our geotechnical consultant, advances and does some more modeling and some other things they do. We'll revisit the market analysis. Geotechnical studies I've already talked about. So they're going to need to go back out and do more borings under the lagoon, do more seismic analysis. We also, under the FEMA grant, need to actually assess the existing levee of the lagoon. So so far they've been looking at what a future levee would look like that's going to be taller, and how would it respond in an earthquake. Well, we still need to do that for the existing levee under the FEMA grant, so they'll look at the existing levee as well as the different configurations for the future landfill and what the future berm, I should say, would look like. The site development plan, this is where we get into the engineering of the facility, preparing the plans, specifications. This is where we're getting into the engineering stuff. So leachate management is a big one. So rainfall, it rains in Oregon, rainfall soaks to the ground, percolates through the waste that's in there, can potentially leach contaminants out of the waste. You can't allow that leachate to get in the ground. So that's where you have to have a liner system. And we have to have the design for how that leachate is going to be collected, treated, how will you dispose of it. Source water management, stormwater run-on, how are we going to prevent that? Keeping stormwater off the site means less water getting in the ground, which means less leachate that you need to mitigate. So I believe the preliminary designs is the landfill would actually have a liner at the top as well that would prevent water from getting into the ground to begin with. We'd need to look at potential wetland impacts, building the berm taller to accommodate the placement of the waste means the berm needs to be wider at its base, which means it would potentially need to extend down into that riparian area, either that direction or it'd have to extend the direction in the lagoon. If it goes out in the riparian area, we know there's some wetlands down there, so we need to do a wetland delineation and figure out how to mitigate the wetland impacts. Gas management, that's the whole air side of things. So how do you manage the landfill gas, treat it, dispose of it, those types of things. And then we'd have to describe, I already mentioned the monitoring strategies. So once as the facility is being built and operated, we need more monitoring wells to monitor groundwater, air monitoring, all those things. So all of this will have to be described. And then finally, the closure plan. So once the thing is filled, DEQ still expects you to describe how are you going to manage that site in perpetuity. The landfill's now full. We've got our future use on top of it, but you still got that waste there. You still got your monitoring wells. You're still potentially generating that leachate. So how are you going to manage all of that then into the future? Any questions? Okay, let's see. That was task 3 site development plan. Risk assessment and air modeling, I already talked a little bit, but and I'm not an air guy. We have a whole group at MFA that this is all they do. But we've got newer rules in Oregon that were promulgated a couple of years ago due to largely the I think it's a glass factory down in Southeast Portland that got cadmium everywhere, if I recall. At any rate, there's work they would have to do to look at, okay, what kind of chemicals are going to end up in the landfill? Are those chemicals volatile? Can they rise up through the soil and get into the air? Our air modeling folks do dispersion modeling, and they can look at, based on the prevailing wind directions, and model how these potential contaminants disperse out into the environment. Who are the receptors nearby? Well, we know to the west we have residences. So their whole risk assessment air modeling task is looking at, again, what kind of chemicals could end up in the landfill? Do they volatilize or not? At what rates? What's the flux of the stuff getting in the air? How's the stuff going to disperse out in the environment? And will that put anybody at risk? And then these are just all the subtasks, the emissions estimations, conceptual models, looking at who are the receptors, where are they located, how does stuff disperse in the environment? And then they finally prepare the report that concludes whether there's any potential for anyone to be at risk from air emissions from the landfill. Wastewater treatment plant impact analysis. So again, I already mentioned the existing plant is going to need to be moved. So this task is all about how do we do that? There's a lot to it. Obviously, permitting a new facility, decommissioning an old facility, designing and building a new facility, permitting it. How are you going to get all your wastes rerouted to some new facility? That's what this whole engineering exercise will be about. It won't be as I said, this is phase 1C. So it's not going to be at the end of phase 1C, we're not going to have a 100% design for your new facility. But this task will say, well, here's where we think it would get moved to. Here's how we would do it. It's doable. that's the message for the solid waste permit application, right? That we can do this and we want to proceed with doing it. We think it's feasible. So that's the wastewater treatment plant analysis. Permitting. Well, I've already mentioned the solid waste permit and everything we need to do to submit that permit. We need to do the land use compatibility statement, or the LUCS you may have heard. Marketing analysis is basically DEQ's process for the solid waste permit. But in addition to that, that's what this joint permit application piece is. So if you're not familiar with the JPA process with the Corps of Engineers, but anytime you have a facility that's has a federal nexus, meaning is this project funded by federal dollars, or are there wetland impacts on site that require you to then permit those wetland impacts with the Corps of Engineers? So wetlands are regulated at the state level through the Department of State Lands, and at the federal level with the Corps of Engineers. So when you have a project that could result in wetland impacts, you have to go out and do a wetland delineation, identify where the wetlands are, look at your facility design, decide whether or not the design is going to impact the wetlands, and then you have to submit this joint permit application. It's called joint because it goes jointly to Department of State Lands and the Corps of Engineers. Well, now the Corps of Engineers involved. They're a federal agency. That creates a federal nexus, meaning once that occurs, there's a whole bunch of other things you now have to look at. In addition to the wetlands, you have to look at endangered species under the Endangered Species Act and National Marine Fisheries Service. You have to do biological evaluation. This is basically an exercise where you look at what type of ecological habitat is present at and around the site, what types of species are present, are there endangered species present, and will this project adversely affect those endangered species, up to and including what's called a take. If you actually confirm that, like, yeah, we're going to wipe out habitat for some species, it's a document on biological evaluation. So hopefully we can design the project in a way that we can have mitigation measures that show we're going to minimize those impacts. So the BA, the BE, and then eventually what's called a biological assessment is a big chunk of that. Under the Clean Water Act, the DEQ has to basically certify the project. They have to do what's called a Clean Water Act certification. So they look at the project from a water quality standpoint, and will this facility impact water quality? We need to provide them all the science data to show that it won't. And here's how we'll monitor water quality, both surface water and groundwater quality, so the DEQ can say, okay, yep, we're going to give you your clean water certification that they have to provide to the Corps of Engineers, so that the Corps of Engineers can issue their wetland permit. So all these agencies have to check off on the project and let the Corps of Engineers know that, so the Corps of Engineers can provide our wetland permit. So cultural resources is another one, Historic Preservation Act. So there's a good chance at some point down the road, we're going to need to have archaeologists probably down there in that riparian area, doing some pedestrian surveys, looking for evidence of both historic and prehistoric use of the site. That could lead to doing archaeological excavations. You just don't know. I worked on a site just like this in Lytton for PGE, similar riparian area. We did some work there. We found a Native American site as well as a historic site. We had to go back out there and do some excavations and whatnot. So that's all of this work that may need to occur. And like I said, it's probably that riparian area that would be the focus. Of course, we have to do a wetland delineation, as I mentioned, to confirm where the wetlands are, how many acres, what's their function and values are a thing that we need to assess. Then we need to describe how we'll mitigate any impacts to wetlands. And then, of course, wrap up all of the design because you have to submit that with these wetland permit applications. You have to show what your project footprint is going to be, how many acres of cut or fill are going to occur within the wetlands. So you need to know you need to be about to like a good 90% design in order to do that. And then there's this last bullet is sort of the catch-all for then the time it takes for the agencies to review everything. Undoubtedly, there's going to be comments back from the agencies that we have to address. And that can take time and a lot of back and forth with those agencies to make sure the agencies feel like there's no data gaps remaining about any of these things, and they can sign off that we've demonstrated that we can build this facility and we've made every effort to minimize or eliminate impacts to the environment. So this is it's a big chunk of work. And then last is the phase 2 work plan. So when we submit the permit application, we'll have a work plan that says, after we get that preliminary authorization, here's all the stuff we need to do as part of phase 2. And that will include, obtaining all the permits, getting through the complete design. We've talked about having an offload facility for the landfill if, in fact, the facility is used to bring in sediments dredged from Portland Harbor. The easiest way to get that to the site would be by barge, because barges could load the sediment in Portland Harbor and come right down Multnomah Channel. That means we need some sort of facility where the barges can pull up and we can remove that dredge material and place it. So there may be in the future of this facility other ancillary facilities like an offloading facility, a water treatment plant for the leachate that's collected in the landfill. All of that will need to get prepared as part of the phase 2 scope of work. So a lot more work even after getting the preliminary authorization from DEQ. So, and then of course the cost estimate for that phase 1C is attached for all of those 7 tasks. And that basically concludes all of that. I think next is the question and answers.
They got some questions for him?
Why? If the council doesn't have any, I have one question, or at least if you could comment on the nature of the Portland Harbor material. We looked at some local dredging options, but I think it's really important to get an understanding of the quality and type of material that might come out of the harbor.
Yes, very good question. So yeah, Portland Harbor, as well known, Superfund site. It's been investigated for a decade and a half. Where it's at now in Portland Harbor, there are a number of different sediment management areas that have been defined by EPA. These are the areas in the Portland Harbor where the contamination is kind of the worst, and some sort of active remedies going to need to be applied to those areas. In many cases, that remedy includes dredging the contaminated sediment out of the river and then going back in and placing clean sediment back in those dredge areas to cap the sediment underneath. Other areas will just be capped. And then there are other areas where they call it monitored natural recovery, which means they're just going to not do anything, but periodically sample the river sediments every 5 years or so and see if the contamination is naturally declining over time. So that dredging piece of it, these sediments will need to get removed from the river and they need to get taken somewhere. And there will basically be 2 types of sediment that comes out of the ground. All of it is going to have contamination in it, otherwise it would require dredging. Then those wastes that are the sediments that are dredged are going to basically fall into 2 buckets. There's going to be sediments that have contaminants that are at such high concentrations, or there are other types of wastes present in the sediment, what we call NAPL, which is an acronym for non-aqueous phase liquid, which means, like, the best analogy is oil and water. You have a pan with water, you put olive oil on it, the olive oil floats because it doesn't dissolve in water. It's a non-aqueous phase liquid. Well, there are areas in Portland Harbor where we know in the sediment there's these tars and oils and things like that. So anyway, that bucket of the really contaminated stuff would potentially classify as hazardous waste under RCRA, the Resource Conservation Recovery Act. And the facility that we're looking at constructing at the lagoon would not be permitted to handle hazardous waste. So we want to make that very clear. And the design that's EPA is overseeing this advancing for the Portland Harbor, has very clear guidelines on how, when people are dredging the sediment out of the river, how it's going to be sampled and characterized so that we know every cubic yard of stuff that comes out of the river, what's in it and where it needs to go to. If it's hazardous waste, one option is to go to the facility, the waste management facility in Arlington, we're in Eastern Oregon. They have it's a subtitle C facility, I think, which is a hazardous waste landfill that can accept hazardous waste. What we're looking at is a solid waste landfill under DQ's program, which is cannot accept hazardous waste. So potentially a lot of that sediment that will get removed from the Portland Harbor will not classify as hazardous waste, but will just be sediment that still has contamination in it, but at concentrations that are below those hazardous waste thresholds, and they don't have any of those tars and those sorts of things. So that's the stuff that could, Hillsborough landfill, Mountain Hillsborough is a solid waste landfill. It can take soils that are contaminated. We dig up underground storage tank sites with petroleum contaminated soil, and as long as the chemicals are below those limits that define it as a hazardous waste, and we can show through sampling analysis just a solid waste, Hillsborough can take petroleum contaminated soils. So that's what we would potentially be looking to do, is have this facility be a repository for contaminated sediments, but not hazardous waste. So Portland Harbor, 100 plus years of industry there, pretty much name any chemical you can think of that you've ever heard about, it's been detected in the sediments. Petroleum hydrocarbons, pesticides, herbicides, dioxins and furans, PCBs, metals, all of these things at one place or another in the harbor have been detected at different amounts, just depending on what industry was at. There's definitely pockets of things like pesticides where you find a lot of those in sediments right offshore of the former Rome Planck site. You find a lot of PHs right offshore of Northern Natural Gas, metals in other areas, PCBs in other areas. So it would not be clean material, but the material has already been very well characterized in Portland Harbor through all the sampling that's been done over the years. And then when this stuff gets removed, it would get sampled again to confirm where it needs to end up. So that's why when I said we sample those groundwater wells for like everything you could possibly imagine, it's in anticipation of potentially putting material in the landfill that could have any or all of those chemicals present in the waste.
Would this take all the soils from that site? Is this the only site that they would be done with it then? All their soils?
Yeah, that's a good question. I know in our marketing analysis, I don't have the answer off the top of my head, but we did look at that. We looked at how much stuff is going to be dredged out of the harbor. What's the capacity of landfill, and does the facility have the capacity to take all of that? I believe the answer is yes. But if Kathy were here, she could probably answer that off the top of her head. But our marketing analysis did look at that. And we're going to redo the marketing analysis here as part of phase 1C. And the other thing is, when we first did the marketing analysis in 2016, the estimates of the sediment need to be dredged out were preliminary. All of the parties that are going to be responsible for the cleanup in the harbor right now are in the throes of the design phase for each one of those sediment management areas. They're back out taking more sediment samples. You can rest assured all the parties are trying to find ways to minimize the amount of sediment that they need to dredge out of the river. So they're trying to, turn all the knobs they can to move the needle towards less dredging. But at the end of the day, EPA's criteria for what needs to be dredged is very clear. And as it's going to be a few more years for each one of these sediment management, I think there's 10 of them to go through the full remedial design. I mean, just like we got to design these landfills, these parties have to design how they're going to remove the sediment, how much, how deep, laterally, how far. EPA will be reviewing that. And at the end of the day, EPA will have to approve the design that for the remedy, each one of those sites. And at some point down the road, we will know the final volume of material from each of those sediment management areas. And we should have a really good sense of how much of that sediment will be hazardous waste and needs to go to someplace like Arlington, and how much of it will just be solid waste and could potentially be put in the at the lagoon facility. And in general, my recollection is in Portland Harbor that not a lot of the sediment that would be dredged is classified as hazardous waste. There are a few pockets, but a lot of it, based on all the data that's been collected over the years, is that most of the sediment that would be dredged would not classify as hazardous waste.
Has anybody done a ballpark cost of what the facility here would take to build to receive that?
Yes, that marketing analysis we did in 2016 looked at exactly that. It looked at what are the tipping fees for
Tipping fee.
tipping fees, meaning when a truck comes up and wants to tip over and dump waste into your landfill, how much do you charge that truck? We refer to as tipping fees, but how much would you charge per ton of material to for this material to be placed? So back in 2016, we looked at, other facilities and how much they're charging per ton for disposal. So that would be your revenue is charging per ton for stuff to be placed in your facility. Like I said, we refer to that as tipping fees, but anyway, so yes, we looked at that. We looked at what the market could support, how much material, and we did the what's the financial term for when you look at cost year after year and inflation, and I just can't remember the term right now for that, but we did look at scaling this out over 10, 20, 30 years. Tipping fees go up every year. So our market analysis looked at all that, looked at the cost of the design and build the facility. But we're going to redo that as part of this phase 1C now that we know we've got some geotechnical challenges and how to mitigate those. And those are going to come with the costs that we want to know better. So sharpening our pencils on what those costs would be, and then redo that market analysis.
Right. So based off of that, it sounds like for me, I'm gonna need to see what the status of the berm is. I'm significantly concerned about the berm. And also the fact that the current liner is already bad and leaking into the groundwater. So before we start thinking about what we're gonna do to change it, I think we need to look at what we're gonna do to fix what's happening now. That's just, I hate to be that person that jumps in like that, but I mean, that's
Also,
concerning.
we have to look at the cost of a new sewer plant, which for this size, I've done some research on that, and we're talking $50 million. So you got to figure out how you're going to get that money, even before you start this project. If you do it, you got to have a new sewer plant because you're going to take that
We have
offline.
to fix what's happening there first before we, do anything else, because it's not in the best status right now. That's my thoughts, and
Well, and it's not even a go yet. I mean, there's still a
Oh, I
lot
know.
of work to do that would even say that it even qualifies for a permit, is what I heard being said.
well, for the landfill, but I'm saying, like, even if we decide to do nothing, I think we have to address the current issues of the lagoon.
Well, and that work will get us there, to understanding the stability of the lagoon and things of that nature.
It sounds like more of like a liability factor, though, is the perspective I was getting, is like, well, we want to make sure we're safe, that water was already bad before we did this, so we can't prove that it was the new landfill that I hate to be that person, but that's
Yeah.
land gathered.
But what we're getting is information to see how safe this is even for our lagoon too. We're learning stuff about our lagoon that we've never known before.
I know.
Yeah, and I could speak real quick to the groundwater data that we collected actually helps inform that very question already. So I could pull up the table, but in our phase 1B report, those data tables for the groundwater samples we collected from the monitoring wells, we compared the chemicals that we detected and their concentrations. We compared to, on those tables, there are some screening criteria. They're called risk-based concentrations. These are DEQ specified numbers that are chemical specific that look at the question of, is the concentration of this chemical putting anyone or anything at risk? So we know from the work we did that the groundwater underneath the landfill flows towards Multnomah Channel. And there's a groundwater contour map I can pull up, but it's in our report that basically contours the water table and shows that it slopes towards the channel. Groundwater flows downhill, even underground, most of the time. So the groundwater could potentially discharge into Multnomah Channel, and DEQ has these risk-based concentrations for surface water. So it looks at in surface water in Multnomah Channel, if this chemical was detected in that surface water at a concentration of X, would that concentration be putting any of the animals that are living in Multnomah Channel at risk? And we did that comparison on our table, and there are a few chemicals that were detected. The groundwater sample that we collected right under the lagoon had some detections, and some concentrations were high enough that they exceeded that risk-based concentration for surface water. But the but is, well, the sample that we collected is right under the landfill. And once we went over and sampled the monitoring wells on the levee, we saw much less contamination, and overall very few exceedances of that risk-based concentration. And that's for a groundwater sample. We know when groundwater discharges a surface water feature, there's immediately a 1,000 to 1, pollution, if you will. So DEQ has provided that report. They've got that data. They're aware of that now. They have not yet commented on it. But your question is very good. Like, what are we putting anyone at risk? And that is something that could be addressed further down the road. The main way you would do that is basically from the levee moving towards Multnomah Channel is to go closer to the river and maybe collect some more groundwater samples and see if those concentrations are even persisting as you move towards the river. A lot of chemicals, as they move through the subsurface, they tend to absorb the soil particles, especially if there's a lot of organic carbon. So there's a lot of things that can attenuate that. So,
Well, I think we'd like to know those numbers sooner than later, because we have, DEQ working on that in-water stuff too. And
Yeah.
with Office Max, and it's not fair to us to have them trying to put sediment over already built up sediment there. Because that slough is so slow, it had built up a huge amount of sediment on those banks over the years, because there's no tug traffic going up like there used to be. We are deep water port right in front of that whole area, just so you know.
Mhm.
About another, probably half a mile.
Yes, dredged up to the former mill, if I recall.
Yes, and it's considered deep water port, and it
Mhm.
used to never be that shallow as it is right now. And to be fair, also, the lagoon was built in 1971, but the paper mills have always been producing chemicals that make paper. So where was it going? Probably to the least path of resistance, which is right in line with the mill, and stuff flows downhill. So that, they're on the hook for that. Boise's on the hook for that. That's what I want to know. That's what concerns me. And DEQ and Office Max.
Yeah, I can speak to that a little bit, but because before I came to MFA 8 years ago, I worked for another consulting firm in town for 22 years, and Boise Cascade was my client, and I was the project manager for the remedial investigation of the mill and the sediment offshore of the mill. Did a ton of work out there from 2000 through about 2014. And then I left that company and went to MFA and left that project behind me. It's still an ongoing project. All of that work that we did characterizing the sediment quality offshore the mill is all in the DEQ public record. And I think before I came to MFA did all the due diligence for the purchase of all these properties. And I was getting calls from folks at MFA when I was in my old job, like, tell me more about this work you're doing out here. And so there is that site is very well characterized, including the sediment quality offshore the mill, and that's all in the public record. And I think this city probably has all of it as part of the due diligence we did, that MFA did.
Well, we definitely would like to have you back to talk a little bit more about those type of things, especially in the near future for this council to hear. Because that is currently going on right now.
Yeah.
The water piece. We want to further understand that. I don't
Yep.
know what that, you know, how that relates to this lagoon project, but, it's something that we need to be looking at. And
Yeah.
seriously, find out our, not only just what DEQ is doing, but our legal rights too.
I
Very
was
concerned.
gonna mention the sludge, we sampled the sludge, summer 2022 that's in the lagoon currently. Because one of the question was, what do we, if we want to build a facility, what are we gonna do with all that sludge? And all the sampling we did the sludge, remember how I talked about how depending on the chemical concentration, some material can be a hazardous waste or not a hazardous waste? The sampling we did confirm the sludge is not a hazardous waste, which means if this facility is built, it could be, the sludge could just be pushed up in a pile, dewatered, and then just remain in the facility. If it came back as a hazardous waste, that'd be a whole different story. Then that sludge would have to go to Arlington and that.
Absolutely, but some of the chemicals that were hard on maybe some of the animals, we need to know what's also in front of that, in that, you know, they're wanting to just do the charcoal method in the sediment. And it's already silted in, and that does us no good. We have a very active waterfront where boats can park in that area, and we'd like to understand it a little bit more, so.
Mhm.
Any other questions? I hate to rush you, but we're just trying to, we're gonna have to shut down to doing a 7 o'clock meeting here soon, but,
Yeah.
Councilors have any questions?
$863,000 budgeted for them,
It's a FEMA, it's grant funded, all of it.
all of it.
Yeah, everything has been grant funded, all the research we have done today. Yeah.
So this
It's
is a remaining.
forgivable, so there's no.
It's no loan, nothing, no, it's 100%, so, and we have a better understanding. I don't know that the in-water piece would be funded, but we really should talk to, some people about this before Office Max and DEQ get done with all this.
Office Max /
It
Boise.
really needs to happen, it really needs to happen, and I'm really adamant about that.
I
So,
wanted to mention in that the phase 1C scope of work, the work that we're going to front load is the additional geotechnical work and the market analysis, and looking at what would be the mitigation for some of those geotechnical challenges. We want to answer that question as early on in phase 1C as possible. So I envision, Kathy could talk about this more, but our vision is we do the additional geotechnical analysis, advance the design, redo the market analysis, and we want to confirm that, yes, we think this is still a constructible and economically viable project before we spend the full $800,000, right? So there's going to be, that's what I've been pitching this all along. Once we started to better understand the geotechnical conditions, I said to the engineers, like, I think we need to revisit the market analysis and advance our understanding of this and confirming it's still economically viable project. So that is our plan, is to have a point down the road here in the near future where we'll do all that and revisit with the city our findings, and hopefully the outcome will be the green light that yes, we should proceed with going through the full phase 1C and submitting the permit application and proceeding on. So, and we're not going to just go all the way through phase 1C and go, oh boy, this project's not going to pencil out. So,
okay, yeah, but more importantly to me right now is just knowing that old pipe, listening to the old boys talking, that there's just a pipe that just came out to the edge of the slough, and that's where the distribution was. Very, very concerning.
I know about that pipe very well from my prior.
We had a pull yard up
I know.
above. We had a pull yard up above the big creosote plant.
Yeah, the former wastewater outfall we referred to.
Yeah, so we definitely need to be looking at that as well, so. I think that's just as concerning, knowing all that. So, all right, thank you for giving us that presentation. We hope, we can help us out with, understanding the lagoon further.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
Yep, we are adjourned.
Okay, have a good evening.
Yep.
Actually. No, it's a regional kind of thing.
So exactly. Okay, we'll call this council regular session to order. It is Wednesday, March 6th. The time is 7 p.m. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, we'll go ahead and open it up for visitor comments. If you'd like to come up and make a comment, keep it to 3 minutes, state your name for the record, keep it to 3 minutes or less, and if we'll be taking notes of action if needed. Go ahead.
Good afternoon, my name is Art Leskowicz, and we'll make a few short comments in reference to the technical session that we just had here. Won't repeat a lot of what was said, but this has been something that's been in the works for almost a decade now. Planning for a lagoon landfill, and I've always been told, no, we're not really planning for a landfill, but we're just thinking about it. Well, we're now potentially funding the permit application. One of the concerns I've had shared with you before was no other considerations of anything else has been brought to the table. Cleaning it up, turning it into some kind of a marina or moorage certainly should be addressed. We need to clean it up anyway before we put a liner in there to collect new sediments. Lots of other options. We'd love to hear us talk about that. It'll always be a landfill. I don't even think there's gonna be enough sediments to fill it as proposed, but again, glad that we're getting more information. We've already spent $1 million with Mall Foster and others to get to this point. Now we're gonna spend another $900,000. Good information, good to have, so we know what is out there and we can move forward with proper decisions. But we've made a lot of really improper, I believe, environmental decisions. Our transparency and stewardship is greatly lacking. My research has read a lot of those illegal meetings with the governor's office, Mall Foster, DSL. That was all revolving around this lagoon project. We've had many other failed environmental concerns. The ditches that were cut into the landfill cap, our water tank leak problem. And a lot of you guys may have been on the panel, some not, but don't quote me, I'm sorry, I wasn't prepared. This was 4th of July, 2-3 years ago, exciting about a $5 million company coming to town because they were gonna moor barges out here. Right here, Willamette Concrete Company. And we had a permit in and they were on their way. DSL was gonna rubber stamp it. I mentioned it to everybody that was on the council at the time and I got no feedback. But that did not go through. Took one phone call to let DSL and DEQ know that you're gonna moor those vessels in the most contaminated area of that waterfront. And one final point, again, I put everything in writing and I'll bring it to you. I've got maps, great things like that. Nobody ever mentions, especially in these recent reports, where is our drinking water intake? Right there. Mile downstream from our discharge point. And another thing that hasn't been considered, it's in the news now, PFAS. We've been dumping AFFF from our firefighting facility into the lagoon for the last decade. And you know what PFAS is all about. So I just throw that. I'll bring you more next time and I'll put it all in writing and bring you a couple maps. Thank you for your time. Appreciate it.
Yep. Come on up. It's that time.
What's happening, everybody? I'm back. My name's Will Bill still. I think I want to see you guys. Yeah, I don't really know how to do this all correctly, but this is the gist.
Make sure Kathy gets one.
Good.
Make sure.
Maybe you're gonna split that one? There we go. I think a picture, so I still got one. Hey, man, it's pretty simple. 17, 18 years ago, we'll cover a canoe out here. Like I said, this group asked me and my group to come and to do that. You guys spent some money to do that. It's, I believe about $5,000 just to get us to carve that canoe. So you're invested. Your logo is what we were doing. I came back, I did, from our group in April or March of that year, 2006, and asked that you give it a story to make it a canoe. You guys said, well, Bill, please don't make it a story. Well, the story continues. We shared it for many, many years. Like I was showing you earlier today, with that nice thing on the one of your counselors was in the video. You guys all, the two of you I know the canoe. Have you guys seen the canoe before? Have you seen it? Have you seen it? Yeah. You know, it really is something of spectacularness to sit in that and to float on the waters. And to get your Lewis and Clark adventure, 365 days a year. I would be proud if my child had carved on that canoe. You guys have 455 kids around here. I don't know, 24, 22 to 26 years old. I think in the news right now, we're talking about how that group really needs some help. Hey, man, let's give them a thumbs up, man. Something you did right. Freebie. There's never been anything said about those kids in this city. You guys spent $5,000 on it to get it carved, and you never thanked our children. If you know me, I don't know if any of you do. I work with 50,000 kids in northern Nevada. Willow Reindeer Week. I'm the governor for 6 years straight. We uplift our children. Such an important thing. Such an important thing. So we know when you hear that, you don't know if any natives have been on the canoe or were a part of the canoe. That was one of the things that I had heard. When you hear that this canoe is going to be put out into the park, with some holes in it so it don't fill up with water, you almost cry. Paddle that thing all the way to St. Louis with William Clark's 5th generation grandson. They got us on your logo. Just throw it out there. Anyways, so I found a couple other members of society because I ain't going away. I can't. I took the shoes and said, I'll be the heart of this group. I was almost dead. Rick, you told me out there. Well, you were gone the last time I saw you. I was 127 pounds when I was fighting the world to live. They got me a dab, baby, and I live. And I'm just here to share this thing. Okay? I'm gonna get the insurance because I like to share it with people in the water. But until that happens, we should be sharing it with our schools. And so I'm here all summer, and that's what I plan to do. So I've handed you that thing right there. What it is this, usually for 13 years, I asked you guys for your trailer. I went out and bought a trailer for this, for a different canoe. I'll bring it for your canoe. Okay, it's something that I really hope that here in the next few weeks, you guys can make a decision on. Can't just sit outside and be ruined. That'd be a disgrace. It needs to be taken care of. I'm the guy to do it for you. Matter of fact, I'm the guy you guys had to do it for a couple of decades. All right, there's gonna be a couple of people talking. I think Ferris Lawrence is gonna come up here. We had also heard that maybe there wasn't a native that was involved with the canoe. Whoa! Let's hear the story real quick. Ferris Lawrence and Washoe.
Come on up and say your name for the record.
No, that one.
Hi, how are you guys doing today? Well, back in
State your name for the record.
it's Farrah Loosely Hawkins now. But back in 2006, you guys had the encampment down here with Lewis and Clark. I was with the Title VII Indian group and teaching children about different Native American things. And John Ruskey come over to our tent and he invited me out to go look at the log and see what I saw on the log. And so I told him the story of the creation of the earth, is what she is. And we designed her out and carved on her, and I worked on her some more after everybody got done, but we were here for about a week working on her, which was fun. My kids got to help carve stuff, now they're all grown, got 12 grandkids. But it's something that's kind of been hidden away, but kept where she wasn't getting, trampled onto that. I would paint her and redo her every year and paddle in her. In fact, I was a page on the newspaper one year. But the creation of the earth, the beaver on the back couldn't go down far enough to get the dirt that God needed. And so the turtle decided to go down, and he got a mouthful and brought it back up and flew on the eagle up to heaven. And so he gave that, and that's how the earth was created, with the land instead of just water. But that's a short version of the story. I believe it would be something good for the children, especially out here. We have a lot of Native American heritage out here, that's been kind of went through a lot of rough roads. Where I grew up out in Warren, we would go out and dig up artifacts in our backyard, which is really kind of cool. It was one of the largest Indian groups out here. I found out that the big grinding stones in the cow field behind the house is where our houses used to have, was the kitchen for the Native Americans. And they're doing some archaeological digs, I heard, in some different spots out here. But the canoe itself has been to St. Louis, over to Washington, D.C. She's got a lot of good history, and she's made to fly down the river. You have to try her out. I mean, you got to get in and paddle it, and it's a lot of fun. She can take on waves like you wouldn't believe. Just like turn her right and make sure you don't get toppled. But I think teaching the kids and stuff and showing her off would be good. We were talking about an enclosure for her. If she is going to be out, it would be good to have like a plexiglass and log enclosure would be good. Kind of like a long house, that way we could roll her in and out to take her out and take people on trips inside and learn stuff too. I actually got to do that with some people and take them on a little drift where I did duck hunting and stuff. Well, it used to be Bayport Marina, but now it's Scappoose Bay. And anyhow, we got a lot of good things out here and a lot of things that we can teach with her. So I just believe it would be good to get her out and show her off.
Wait, other visitor comments?
Yeah.
See it. Howard Blumenthal. I just want to reiterate again about how neat of a boat it is. If you've never had a chance to go out and paddle it, please do. It's remarkable when you're paddling it to see what Lewis and Clark actually was pushing through the water, and to think of that thing with all the gear that they had to have in it to do the journey that they did. It's really remarkable. I'd really like to see the boat stay in a condition that we can see it be in the water where it's probably the happiest that it can be is when it's floating and giving joy to people. I really hope that the city council looks at trying to keep it in a much better place than where it is, if it's being stored outside underneath tarps, because it's a valuable resource. It's a pride for our community that we carved it and put it all together. I could keep going on, but I know you guys had a long day. I think you guys get my point. So that's all I'm going to say for now.
Evening. My name is Mark Bowe, BOWE. I'm a First Street, St. Helens resident. I've known Willow, I don't know, 4 or 5 years since I moved here. First saw the canoe down at the end of First Street on a big long trailer. It took my breath away. I stopped. My wife's like, you can't get out there and just go do that, but I did. I've seen it several times. I've been in it. I've paddled it down the Columbia River. It's, for me, I just am here to speak to Willow and how passionate he is about it. How, I know that if you agree to whatever terms he's asked for, that he will take good care of it and do exactly with it what he said he would. And that's why I was here, to be supportive for Willow. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark.
Brady Freeheim. So I was a little happy, which is surprising, at a city council meeting. To hear that you are considering extending the contract to the end of the year. But, yeah, that's a great idea, thank you. However, I don't think that you quite understand the complexity of tourism if you think that you can do a contract now and sign it in November. The contract really needs to be done by at least the middle of the year for 2025. It takes longer. The planning for 2025 starts now. So you cannot wait till November to sign the contract. So you guys need to get up to speed and you need to get the RFP done, and it should be done and completed and agreed to by at the latest June. Because you don't know the complexity of tourism and how long it takes and the planning. And you cannot plan for 2025 in November of this year. It needs to be done by this summer. So you're making progress in the right direction, but again, your timing is off. November is too late. I wasn't gonna really comment about the canoe, but it's like, I agree that I think that it should be on the water, since people are talking about it. Like, I don't wanna use it. Put the canoe on the water.
Please.
Yeah, so it was like, yeah, go with the canoe. And
Great.
yeah, it's like, I don't wanna see it in a park, especially putting holes in it. It's like, that's kind of crazy, stupid plan, you know, use it. I mean, so it's
You
like,
get in it, you're gonna go for a ride?
I'd love to. I would actually love to go for a ride in the canoe, so yeah. So, yeah, put the canoe out there and let people use it.
Sign a waiver.
Any other visitor comments?
City of St. Helens, Nick Helmick and Ivan Helmick.
Seeing you kind of nodding off there.
Congratulations, Nick. Thank you. Yeah, they got like 4 hours of sleep, but not all at once, like 2 and 2. We're taking shifts. Good old days, best days of our lives. So I shared Molly's Market is having an estate sale tomorrow and Friday from 10 to 3 p.m. I'll be there, baby will be there. We are accepting tuition donations for his trade. It'll probably be $1 million by the time he's 18 and goes to school. So I'm really banking on Powerball. That's my goal. Other than that, I think, you know, the mini excavator, when I saw mini excavator, I looked it up. I'm like, that's like 10,000. So is this like more like a mid-sized excavator? Like,
Yes.
okay, it's not like a D10 size, I'm assuming, but it's
It'd be medium size.
okay. I was like,
That's what they consider mini public works.
mini in a different sense. Okay, cool. I didn't know if there's a way maybe to rent out, because I know it's gonna be an appreciating asset that we'll have. So I don't know if there's other ways to rent, but I know if you rent something, you gotta get it delivered, and that delivery fee is probably just gonna cost through the moon as well. So in the long run, it's probably gonna be better just to buy that. So but yeah, that's all I'm gonna say. Thank you guys for being up here, and sorry I'm not so energetic. I'm tired, but it's all worth it. So thank you guys.
All right, thanks, Nick. Hey, any other visitor comment? Okay, how about on Zoom?
One, Mason J.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen of the council. My name is Mason. I come to you from Reno, Nevada, and I would just like to recount my experience of Willow's Canoe, because this has stuck with me. Well, not even Willow's Canoe. He said it was built with him and a whole bunch of other people, and it signified resilience and toughness and everything that he has been through and a bond between those people. And I remember we were sitting on the beach at Lake Tahoe, and we see this big old canoe coming up. And we're like, wow, that thing is absolutely gorgeous. And of course, start talking to him. He offers us a ride. I'm a little skeptical at first because I don't know him. And I'm like, it's a cool canoe. Might as well. We go out. He's explaining the connection with Lewis and Clark. He's explaining the story behind the canoe, which I'm sure you guys have heard countless times tonight. However, when I heard that he had this taken away from him and potentially put in holes in it, that's like putting a bird in a cage so it can't even fly. That's like, I would hate to see it. It stuck with me for quite a while, just going out. He offered everyone on the beach a ride in that canoe. Everybody. So I appreciate you guys. I hope you guys make the right decision. I have never been to St. Helens, Oregon, and I plan to go there if you guys free the canoe. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Mason. Okay, any others? All right.
I know, I'm really having a hard time tonight, Nick.
Okay, ordinance final reading 3299. Ordinance amending the St. Helens Municipal Code, chapter 13.30 regarding the St. Helens Public Safety Fee to expand the use of the fee to public safety operations.
Move we adopt ordinance number 3299 as read.
Second.
Okay, motion's been made and seconded to approve ordinance number 3299. Discussion? Just the mechanism to put in place to be able to have flexibility with funding and future funding, so. Okay, Council President Chilton.
Aye.
For Sunday.
Aye.
Councilor Gunderson.
Aye.
Councilor Hubbard.
Aye.
And I'm an aye as well. Award bid contract to Landis and Landis for First Street, St. Helens, or South First Street, St. Helens, and St. Helens Street intersection joint utility trenching and electrical services undergrounding project R-685A in the amount of $454,912.50. Oh, and we gotta go on here, sorry. Well, what? Should I do them separately or together?
Separately.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
Oh. I move we adopt, or award bid contract item number 2 to Landis and Landis for the First Street intersection.
I'll second that.
Okay, a motion's been made and seconded to approve award contract to Landis and Landis for First Street and St. Helens Street. Council President Chilton.
Aye.
Councilor Sunday.
Aye.
Councilor Gunderson.
Aye.
Councilor Hubbard.
Aye.
And I'm an aye as well. Award purchase of new mini excavator for public works operation to Pape Machinery Inc. for $86,812.50.
Move to award purchase of the new mini excavator for public works operations to Pape Machinery Incorporated for $86,812.50. Second.
Okay,
Discussion?
yep,
So was this already an item that has been budgeted for this year?
yeah.
Okay, that's what I just want to clarify.
Something that's
No
been,
new purchases, okay.
it's been put off for several years, and it's not just the excavator, it comes with the attachments. Like rock hammer and compactor and
Bobcat.
brush rakes and.
Hard to get parts for
I
too.
just wanted to make sure it was already budgeted for and planned.
Okay, motion's been made and seconded. Council President Chilton.
Aye.
Councilor Sunday.
Aye.
Councilor Gunderson.
Aye.
Councilor Hubbard.
Aye.
And I'm an aye as well. Approve and authorize for signature for extension of contract with Hasa Inc. for sodium hydrochlorate for the wastewater treatment plant. 5, agreement with Express Bill Pay for payment processing services. 6, agreement with Ben Mailing Services for utility bill mailing services.
Motion to approve line items 4, 5, and 6 is read.
Okay, motion's been made and seconded to approve and authorize for signature 4, 5, and 6. And I just want to thank our financial director and her team for all the hard work. We learned that we are going to be having significant savings in our billing process. So thank you, Gloria. Make sure the team knows that we thank them very much for all their hard work. Council President Chilton.
Aye.
Councilor Sunday.
Aye.
Councilor Gunderson.
Aye.
Councilor Hubbard.
Aye.
And I'm an aye as well. Consent agenda for approval, 7 council minutes dated January 10th, 2024. 8 OLCC licenses, 9 accounts payable bill list.
I move to consent agenda for approval, line items 7, 8, and 9.
Okay, motion's been made and seconded to approve consent agenda for approval 7, 8, and 9. Any discussion? Not hearing any. Council President Chilton.
Aye.
Council Funding. Aye. Council Jefferson. Aye. Council Heatherly. Aye. I'm an aye as well. Okay, work session action items. I don't think we had anything.
On the timber,
Oh, yeah,
Oh.
direction, yes,
just direction to.
yeah. So earlier it was discussed, Councilor Hubbard about the timber sale and at least getting, putting it out to get some proposals for the cut, and seeing what it could bring, because, our forester said we needed to act if we wanted to, think about that. And, council in earlier, was directing, John to go ahead and move forward with that, so.
And that's the parcel that was ripe for cutting.
That's right, yeah, so.
Get it. Sale organized and get ready for bid, and you have an opportunity to. Send it out for bid and review the bids.
Yeah.
That's all I think, we're just doing paperwork here.
Right.
Yeah. So. Okay, so, somebody like to make a motion to direct John to move the timber sale forward?
I'll make that motion for John to move that timber sale forward, John.
Okay.
Second.
Motion's made and seconded. Council President Chilton.
Aye.
Councilor Sunday.
Aye.
Councilor Henderson, Councilor Hubbard, and I'm an aye as well. Okay, let's go on to council reports. Council President Chilton.
Well, I just wanted to give a quick shout out to the finance team again. That's just really amazing. One of the things that we said we wanted to do in this budgetary cycle right now is try to, tighten things up and look at things that we wouldn't normally do. You get into the habit of just, your day-to-day routine at work, we all do it, and a lot of things don't get looked at. And so this is one of those things where they took the time to really look at things and noticed a huge savings. And I appreciate you guys for doing that and really, embracing the season that we're in right now and being attentive to that. So shout out to them. I attended my monthly meeting with the Community Advisory Council. I'm their government seat for the council out here for Columbia County. It's the Columbia Care, which is the insurance for OHP out here. So we talk about Medicaid dollars and how we're allocating those in the county for Medicaid residents. And so there's always really good things happening and talking about where the focus will be for some of those federal dollars with behavioral health and impacting youth and seniors and different things that help with the community. I have a tour with Public Works in the next couple of weeks. One of the things that we heard from Public Works is that they want to see city council, out in the field with them a little bit more. So I jumped on that and I will be around town and, seeing what these guys are doing and hopefully getting a better understanding of how Public Works works and functions and what everybody does. So I'm excited about that. And then I've been just busy with the rest of us up here, Citizens Day planning, and I'm very excited about that. I think it's going to be a really great event, and I think it will help us, keep our community together while we're going through some difficult times right now. So I'm looking forward to it, and I'm not afraid to get my hands dirty. So I'm excited, and I'm pretty sure I'm gonna have a lot to do. So that's it.
Thanks.
Not a lot this time. We'll welcome our high school students. Always good to see you guys and welcome one of our newest community members. So, nice to see. Also thank all those who have participated today. We had some great presentations, I thought, by both Main Street and the library particularly. So thank them for their work and preparation. Next week is the Parks and Trails meeting on Monday. We did have one resignation at the past meeting. So I want to thank Brian Long for his service and again, let the community know we have 2 openings. So if you are interested and passionate about our Parks and Trails, it would encourage you to look into doing the Parks and Trails Commission. And then again, thank the finance department for your work and the big savings that you discovered, and hope that every department can take a deep dive and see if there's ways that we can save some money. So think that's it.
Thanks. Councilman Anderson.
As usual, my report happens before everything that I go do, so planning commission next week, which I'm looking forward to. And then the joint planning commission council meeting, which should be interesting. Gloria, I'd like to thank you, Jamie, and the other person, I forget the Dawn, for, yes, all your work. We did get an email, from Chief Greenway inviting us to go do some ride-alongs, which I took him up on. I went Friday with, if I could say his name, Jamin Coy, the most loved guy in the police department.
Judge Rose King.
And and I had a fantastic time with him. It was only 3 hours, but one of the stops was about 2 of those hours. Learned a lot from him, and I plan on doing it again for probably a longer time, and maybe with somebody else and see what they're like. But I was pretty impressed with just driving around, and then all of a sudden you would see something, we're whipping a Yui, and I'm like, what happened?
What did you see? Yeah.
You just noticed expired tags, and I was like, how did you pick that up? Because I can't see them when I'm behind the car. So that's all I have to report.
Right, Councilor Albert?
Yeah, that ride along, I'm gonna do that. I some time. That sounds like not necessarily fun, but very eye-opening of their jobs out there, I can imagine.
I had a good time, I gotta say.
And I don't have much. The library, I just spoke to you today and I was absent. I had other things to get done. But working with some businesses, talking about the future of St. Helens, so. Interesting talk on.
Good. So more to come?
Oh, yes.
Okay. So yeah, I want to thank Main Street for a really good presentation, and all the work that they've been doing. Look forward to our joint meeting coming up with the planning commission and them, and lots of, working on I was kind of help with John sparking the idea of getting this power source over to Plymouth Park and trying to figure out power needs over there. The Citizens Day in the park, we may need a little more help than we anticipated with the vendors after looking at the email today. I'm not sure, but maybe something that we make a decision on. Hopefully not a huge cost, but just looking at the liabilities and just having that one person set for that specific job. Maybe we're paying for. I don't know if everybody's seen that email earlier today. Okay. So it's just about liabilities and she already has the form or a form near it, close to it. Christina does, but so this is kind of one of my big projects too, all of ours big project, and it's getting Citizens Day going forward. Let's see. I don't think if I have any other updates. I met 4 people out here from the BPA with Mike Sykes down here on the waterfront. He was out here showing them, talking about our power needs. So that's good that he is the right person for that job and leadership at the PUD. We're dealing with PGE, the BPA, we're dealing with state and federal funding probably on this whole big, huge project for our area. It's a huge undertaking. The lack of power that we have here and getting it here, even if we were to start tomorrow, would be 5 years out. Just because of back orders on everything that comes from, basically comes from Mexico for a lot of the big power pole lines. So been a very big learning process, but it's good to see that it's moving forward. We got a grant for the infrastructure down in our waterfront, and it would be nice to also be looking at that waterfront collectively, getting the parcelization for that. Where is it going? Where is the topo? Because we looked at it kind of in general, but it hasn't been accepted by PGE. I know for myself, I've done a very few real estate deals, but the ones I bought properties that were in shambles, and it took getting them ready, like what we're doing down here on the waterfront, in order to make them attractive. So I think we need to start looking at that collectively, and I'm hoping to put that on the next agenda as a work session item, just to start looking at it as a whole. We can get going on getting ready. So,
Part of the reason why we're doing the work right now, right?
yeah, but there's other things we can be doing too, and looking at that as collectively as a whole. And I think it would take teamwork, and everybody should. We have in-house engineers, everything can be done, and it just needs to start moving forward. We've been talking about power. It's not about PGE, but we've been in contact with PGE for the last 4 years. Confirmed. All the power down there. Okay, so that's what I'm trying to also help our little projects along. So. I think that's gonna be, yeah, my report. Any holidays coming up? Not spring break yet.
Easter, St. Patrick's Day. Don't forget Easter's in March.
So our
this year.
joint meeting is the 13th, is that correct? Okay,
Was that for?
4 o'clock, and then I know we talked about another citizen thing in park meeting. I forget, did we set a date for that?
We were gonna talk to the car club.
Okay.
You might need to send him a text
Well,
tomorrow.
no, you know what? I
Oh,
think I
Mark.
still have it. I may have to, I put check marks by everything I was doing, and I can't find that piece of paper.
It's updated, or at least what I made notes of
Oh,
that you're
you
doing.
did.
All
Look
of
at
your work.
this.
It's color coordinated.
Look
I
at
have
this.
pink.
Oh, thank you. All right.